Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's January 15th, and we have a lot to talk about. Last month, I told you about a survey that was conducted by the MS Society in the UK. The results of the survey showed that 3 in 5 people living with MS in the UK experience loneliness due to their illness. And that's 12 times the number of people who experience loneliness in the general population. 58% of the people living with MS in the UK feel isolated, and 42% feel both lonely and isolated. And I don't for a minute believe that this phenomenon is limited to people living with MS in the United Kingdom. I found that one of the more dispiriting and maybe unexpected aspects of MS is that as it progresses, friends sometimes start falling away. Phone calls, texts, and visits become less frequent. So when we first talked about this survey, I suggested that there were some great options available that make social outreach and interaction easier than ever before. And that brings me to my guest today. Mary Pettigrew is an MS warrior and a social media phenom. In 2014, Mary launched MS Pals, a Twitter group that today boasts a community of more than 5,000 followers. Besides MS Pals, Mary is actively engaged in several other online communities, and she's also a passionate advocate of the benefits of finding an avenue of creative expression, especially for people living with MS. But before we get to my conversation with Mary Pettigrew, there are a few other things that you should know about. Fatigue isn't just another MS symptom. It's a symptom that the great majority of people living with MS have to deal with. And it's a symptom that can have an enormous impact on someone's quality of life. To reach for the obvious metaphor here, it's difficult to get very far if you don't have any gas left in the tank. And although fatigue has been shown to be the most common MS symptom, it isn't particularly well understood. It's not specifically reflected in an EDSS score, which is used to measure the severity of MS in a patient. There aren't any confirmed biomarkers that can identify MS fatigue, and MS fatigue isn't the same as just feeling sleepy. In fact, getting more sleep doesn't really improve MS fatigue. So, MS fatigue represents a major riddle for which there aren't many conclusive answers. Well, a research team from the UK conducted an online survey to measure the severity and the impact of fatigue on people living with both relapsing remitting and progressive MS. When it came to trying to better understand the impact of MS fatigue, the survey included questionnaires related to disability, quality of life, anxiety and depression, cognition, and sleep quality. 417 people responded to the survey, and just over 68% of the respondents reported having fatigue. Breaking it down a bit further, 64% of the respondents with relapsing remitting MS reported having fatigue, and 81% of the respondents with progressive MS reported having fatigue. Additionally, higher fatigue severity and impact among all of the survey respondents, those living with relapsing remitting MS as well as those living with progressive MS, were associated with greater physical, cognitive, and psychological impairment. Clearly, MS fatigue can get in the way of living your best life. And these survey results point to the need for more work to be done in identifying ways to better manage a symptom that's so common and at the same time so impactful. If you're interested in finding out more about this research, I'll leave a link to the study results in today's show notes. Since we've just been talking about how MS fatigue is such a common and interruptive symptom, this is probably the most perfect follow-on news. This past spring, a team of occupational therapists, neuropsychologists, neurologists, and neuroscientists in Belgium developed MS Telecoach, a smartphone app designed to help people living with MS fight fatigue by monitoring, measuring, and coaching, all aimed at increasing their activity level. The team recruited 75 people living with moderate to severe MS fatigue for a study to measure whether using the MS Telecoach smartphone app would be useful in reducing MS fatigue. The research team spent 2 weeks using the MS Telecoach app to measure and establish the individual baseline activity level for each person in the study. And for the next 12 weeks, the MS Telecoach app was used to monitor each person's activity level and to provide motivational coaching messages designed to enhance their level of physical activity. At the end of 12 weeks, 57 participants had completed the study, and these participants demonstrated improvement in both motor and cognitive skills, which would indicate an improvement in fatigue. 1/3 of the participants who were characterized as living with severe fatigue were assessed as having more moderate fatigue, and a post-study evaluation indicated that the study participants were very satisfied with the MS Telecoach app as a means of better managing their MS fatigue. So at first glance, the MS Telecoach app proved to be effective as a low-cost, easily accessible, and interactive self-management tool for people living with MS. Hopefully, the results of this initial study will lead to a version of the MS Telecoach app being tested using an even larger population. If you'd like to find out more, you'll find a link to this study in today's show notes. Two companies, WeHealth, which is the technology-based arm of a French pharmaceutical company, and Pathmaker Neurosystems, have joined forces to distribute the first non-invasive neuromodulation treatment for spasticity. The treatment is delivered through Pathmaker's breakthrough device called the myoregulator. The myoregulator uses 2 pairs of disposable electrodes that attach to the surface of the skin and deliver mild electric stimulation to the spinal outflow and peripheral nerve controlling the muscle being affected by spasticity. This stimulation is designed to modulate the excessive neural activity that induces spasticity. Pathmaker has conducted a clinical trial testing their myoregulator among patients with hand spasticity following a stroke. The results of the trial were positive, showing that the trial participants experienced significant muscle function improvement after 5 treatments with the myoregulator, and optimal results were seen after just 2 or 3 weeks of treatment. Current treatment for spasticity can be uncomfortable and produce only short-term results. This new technology could represent a game changer for people dealing with spasticity due to stroke, MS, and other neurological conditions. Everyone benefits from exercise, and research has shown us that people living with MS should make exercise a part of their self-care. But working with a physical therapist can start getting expensive, and just getting to those appointments can be logistically tricky. So Doctors Deborah Backus from the Shepherd Center and Rob Model from the University of Alabama at Birmingham have received funding from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute for a study that will compare the effectiveness of an exercise program that's delivered at a traditional facility and an exercise program delivered at home. Call it telerehab. The study will take place at 7 different sites across the United States, and they're looking for people who'd like to participate. The study will require that participants can get to one of the 7 sites. So if you're between the ages of 18 and 65 and you've been diagnosed with mild to moderate MS, you might want to check out the rest of the eligibility requirements to see if you might be a participant in this study. The 7 sites involved in the study are the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, Marquette University in Milwaukee, the Cleveland Clinic Mellon Center for MS, the University of Colorado in Denver, and the University of Georgia in Athens. If it turns out that telerehab can produce comparable benefits for improving walking and mobility, participation, and quality of life compared to conventional exercise programs that take place in a gym or a rehab center, then you can expect to see the telerehab-based program rolled out and made available to people living with multiple sclerosis. And if you'd like to check out this opportunity to participate in what could be game-changing research, I'll include a link to the eligibility criteria and the contact information for all 7 sites in today's show notes. Participating in MS research is a great way to find empowerment just from playing a small part in solving MS. If multiple sclerosis is part of your life's journey, it can be incredibly rewarding to take part in research that might mean that others living with MS will enjoy better, more effective symptom management, and down the road, even a cure. And if you're someone who enjoys an even greater sense of research involvement, you should think about being a part of iConquer MS. By providing your own health information to the iConquer MS patient database, you can not only participate in MS research, you can propose research. You can send along questions to the researchers and be a full participant in patient-powered research. You can even suggest topics for us to talk about on RealTalk MS. So I hope you're going to consider becoming a participant in iConquer MS, being a part of solving the riddle of MS. You'll find a link to find out more in today's show notes. What impresses me so much about Mary Pettigrew is that she set out to raise the bar on her quality of life. And when she didn't find readily available solutions, she created them. In a moment, we'll talk to my guest, Mary Pettigrew, about things that you can do that just might help you make new connections with others, help you get out without leaving the house, and ultimately create a better quality of life for yourself. Mary Pettigrew brings people together. I'd describe her as a natural at making connections, but some people tend to think that if you're a natural at something, you don't have to make much of an effort to do it. And Mary makes a tremendous effort. And it's a tremendously successful effort at bringing together people affected by MS. She's a tireless advocate and truly a social media sensation. Mary was diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS in 2001. And in 2014, she launched MS Pals on Twitter. Now, MS Pals describes itself as a worldwide community that's been created to advocate and increase global awareness by providing exceptional support, reputable information and activities via online and local interaction with people living with MS, disabilities, and chronic illness. And today, MS Pals has over 5,000 Twitter followers. In addition to MS Pals, Mary's an active participant in a number of different Facebook and Twitter groups, and I think the key word there is active. If you follow any of these groups, you've already seen Mary's posts over and over again. And Mary even finds time for self-expression through her own creative writing blog called Reflection and Renewal. Welcome to the podcast, Mary.
Thank you, John. Hi, I'm beyond thrilled to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, I am beyond thrilled to be talking to you today. So, you were diagnosed with MS in 2001. In 2014, you launched MS Pals. Tell us a little about what MS Pals is and what motivated you to start it.
Well, okay. Look at the time frame there. You're diagnosed in 2001 and then launched MS Pals in 2014. There's several years that had passed before one thing led to another. I had a career long before that in event planning, sales, and marketing. I was married, and then I became diagnosed with MS. one thing led to another from there, and divorce started to come into the picture, and I started a little writing. I was trying to find some sort of creative therapy with music and writing and things like that. And I had never gone on to social media. I was a stepmother at the time also, and but all the kids, they were doing social media and this and that, and I never had any interest, not even even my phone. I didn't even text with my cell phone. So I guess I can have divorce to thank for that. And so I went on Twitter and just kind of learned the hard way as far as learning how to explore who to contact and what to post and who to see and what to say. And I noticed a very large community of people with MS. And one thing led to another from there, where people started, with Twitter, you have, the mentions, the at Mary, at John, at so-and-so, and people were trying to have a conversation, and there were too many acts within one single post. I started thinking, well, let's try and do a hashtag. I think the hashtags had started to begin, about that time, but people still didn't really understand it. So then that's when I decided, it's time to actually make a group. So MS Pals started on Twitter, at MS Pals, and it's continued to this day. It runs somewhat on autopilot. I always welcome new people if they're happy to be interested in being a co-admin with me. We do have a couple of people that help me with that. And then shortly after the MS Pals on Twitter popped up, then my co-partner Carolyn, she started one on Facebook, and then that's when everything just went full speed ahead. And it's been a it's been a very interesting journey. However, there's been some drama involved, but I tell you what, the tribulations and the joy that's come from it far exceeds any of the problems or the drama that I've experienced with doing that. And it's interesting when you deal with so many people, and then you also again with social media and especially in these days, you have to be kind of a watchdog to pay to take care of everybody, to make sure that they're not going to be exposed to the scams and the fake accounts and the fraudulent activities that can be there. So for a couple of years, that was really what MS Pals focused on a lot, especially on Facebook, and that's too bad. But at the same time, that's what we had to do because, well, we just had to take care of people, making sure they receive the best experience that they could by joining our groups.
You weren't particularly active in social media prior to a certain point after being diagnosed, and I'm just curious, from your perspective, how do you think social media has or can benefit people affected by MS?
Well, I think first of all, social media is an extremely powerful tool, but that power can be used for good and for bad. Okay, but let me really do a pinpoint for people with MS and all the communities of chronic illness and disability. The majority of these people don't get out of their homes. They can't, and so therefore this is their lifeline for a lot of people. So therefore, that's going back to what I said earlier, as far as making sure it's a safe place for people to go. It's very important. You have some face-to-face support groups. Some people have their families. Some people have their friends that live in their own communities, but still they don't receive the same type of understanding support that is deserved of being in a group like where people can say, aha, I get what you're saying. Oh, yes, I went through that last week. Or, aha, we don't tell people what to do. There are some groups that are, and some people out there and that do prescribe and do tell people, well, hey, this is what's going on with you. We don't diagnose, we don't prescribe. We're there as support. And this is a very powerful thing to think about. The people who live in rural areas, I live in Dallas, Texas, okay, very populated, but there are people that live on the outskirts who can't make it into any sort sort of, face-to-face groups or support or even doctor appointments. It's very difficult for people who live in rural communities. Therefore, the online support teams, in my opinion, and from the opinions from others that I've heard about, it's crucial. It's a lifeline. They don't have much else.
Well, to your point, just a few weeks ago, the MS Society in the UK issued a report on some survey research that they had done, and their report indicated that 3 out of 5 people living with MS in the UK feel as though they're also living with feelings of loneliness and isolation. And I'm thinking that social media can change that equation, just as you've pointed out. So this sounds like a situation where a group like MS Pals can be particularly helpful.
Well, I completely agree. I really do. And the one thing about MS Pals is that there's, and I have to say this because it's completely true. There's no ego involved. We collaborate and we join other groups, and the other groups join with us. And if somebody's looking for something that we can't provide, we recommend another group that maybe might be helpful for them as well. We recommend certain things online, and other bloggers, and a good example is podcastings, to where we recommend and we collaborate and we share based on what people are going to be needing, and exactly. I read the same report that you're talking about, and I think they're also mentioning the same thing here in the United States. And in fact, I've got some friends who live in very, very rural areas who are surprised at some of the treatment options that I have that don't involve medicine. It's just lifestyle treatment options through my MS clinic where I go to here in Dallas. And see, that's the difference. And so therefore, the more people talk about it, and the more people bring that subject up with the MS Society or the other organizations out there, the MS Foundation in Florida, the MSAA, the Rocky Mountain MS Clinic in Colorado. There's many that are where our voices could really do some good. And that's the key thing. And that's what I really hope more people would do. Use their voices. What do you need? What do you want? And, who can you talk to, and how can we make that happen? Because if they keep silent about it, then the less that's done.
Well, where can people go to find out more about MS Pals?
On Twitter, they can find us. It's at MS Pals, and then if you search under Facebook, you just type in just under the search button for MS Pals. There, you'll see our main group, and also we have a few subgroups. A good example is our, and this one is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and it's MS Pals Legal Matters, where it talks about certain issues whether you're going through a divorce and you have a chronic illness or disability, when you're filing for benefits, whether it be Social Security SSI versus SSDI, what the difference is there, sharing experiences, filing for taxes, writing out your will, and special needs trust. I mean, it's anything goes, because those things are incredibly important, and then on top of that, we've expanded to a couple. We also have MS Pals in the UK, which we have almost. I believe we have about 400-ish members just in the UK group. And what's lovely about all the groups that we have is we have a variety of different administrators that handle those. And Also, what's also lovely about my UK friends is a lot of people with MS deal with insomnia. Well, you can always roll over in the middle of the night here in the United States and know that somebody's going to be up and awake over, in the UK. For me, it's 6 hours later, and so worst case scenario, here's the thing: you're never alone. You're never alone. There's always somebody there.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I include a link to your Facebook page, your Twitter page, in today's show notes to make it really easy for people listening to get to you, because as you just said, there's just no reason for anyone to be alone any longer.
That's fantastic, John. Thank you.
I want to shift gears for a minute and talk about some of your creative activity. You have a blog called Reflection and Renewal. It's a collection of your creative writing. Your writing is sometimes poetry, it's sometimes prose, but the writing is always pretty intense. And I don't mean that in any sort of a bad way. It's very powerful work. It affects people. Tell me about your blog.
Well, okay. My background is music. I've played the piano ever since I was 5, and I still have my piano in my house. And then I had neck surgery back in 2008. It had nothing to do with my MS. It was a cervical issue that needed addressing, and so therefore I was stuck wearing one of those lovely collars for about 3 months. And during that time, though, prior to the surgery, I had bought myself just a cheap acoustic guitar, and I thought, maybe I'll try and play that. I knew I wanted to get back into my music, and so I played on my piano a little bit, but then I picked up my guitar, and I thought, with my writing, maybe I'll try and write a few little songs. Well, even though I've got a music background, I never, ever could put the words, lyrics to composition. I could not put the two together. And so, therefore, my song lyrics turned into poetry. And although some of my earlier work should be songs, and I'm hoping that maybe someday I might be able to collaborate with somebody who can help maybe, morph those into more of a song situation. I happily just kind of evolved into the poetry form of things. And I knew I was terrible at it from a literary point of view because I didn't have any formal training, even in my education, high school and college. That was never my focused area. But once I did it, I knew I needed a very therapeutic outlet. And what I didn't know is how cathartic it was, and how helpful it was, and how passionate I would become about writing and about the written word and about learning more. I became a sponge, wanting to learn as much as I could, like a newfound student once again, and open to criticism. I even touched base with some college professors, who one of them was the dean of creative writing and literature over at the University of North Texas, which is my alma mater, and I didn't care. He grabbed that red pen and he scratched up some of my work, and I was like happy. I was like, yay, okay. So, but it just led to me continuing, and even with today, in today's times, when I watch the news and or I hear certain things that go on, and if I'm feeling such dread or sadness or what have you, I throw those words onto paper. I kind of put a little twist to where it's not like completely what I'm feeling. In other words, I put a little story into the whole thing, and once I finish it, and believe me, it's hard for me to do that sometimes. Sometimes I can just throw out a few paragraphs and I'm fine, and I'm done with it, and I close the chapter on that piece. Other times I labor a lengthy amount of time over the specific words because of my MS. The words and the idea comes into my head, and then once I grab the pencil and I go to work or grab the computer and I start to type, the thought leaves my head, and I have to go back and search and try to find it again, or my thoughts lead into a different direction. But no matter, sometimes even when that happens, it turns out that this poem that should be 3 or 4 poems separately, I've been able to learn how to recognize that. And one last thing about this, the writing community on both Twitter and Facebook is beautiful. They are wonderful people, whether they have disease or disability or not. They have been an enormous wealth of knowledge, and they've given me such strength to keep moving on, and such knowledge as far as, and tips as far as things to do. This next year for 2019, I've decided that I need to focus on my writing, whether that be the journalistic stylings that I do, or narrative stylings that I do for the MS Pals website, or the creative writing, the poetry and the prose and the essays and what have you that I do for myself. That's my focus for this next year, because when I do that, when I sit there and I write and I finish something and I put it out there, the feeling is better than any anti-anxiety drug that's out there. It's better than anything, and it's a cathartic purge. And I just realized, and I told my mother this the other day, some of my work I've now realized, and I don't even have copies of all these yet. My work has been featured in 5 different books, and 2 of them are still yet to be published. But that's really a wonderful thing. And I thought, that's where I need to put my focus. And that's one of the main areas, because it feels good. It feels really good.
Well, not only does it feel good, but I think you really made 2 very important points. One, that your writing really is a very effective coping mechanism for dealing with the curveballs that life can throw at you. And 2, again, you underscore the power and the value of being able to connect with online communities of like-minded people, whether it's MS Pals or whether it's the writing communities that you found. It seems that they both offer so much value to an individual.
Yes, and the more raw and real. Sometimes people get concerned about me when they see some of my writings. It's like, no. This is medicinal. This is therapeutic. This is a good thing. And therefore, the more, and sometimes the more raw and out there, meaning just, again, I use the word purge, a cathartic purge. It's going to connect with somebody. And one of my favorite quotes from, and I'm going to paraphrase because I've seen a couple of different versions of this quote from the poet, the writer Gertrude Stein. She said, "I write for myself and others." She says, "The others, my dear readers, are an afterthought." Okay, so that's kind of what I go along, and but at the same time, if one person, let's pretend hundreds of people read my work. If one person says, "Oh my goodness, this resonated very much with how I'm feeling," or "I understand this very much," or this is how I took this or that," then that is a bonus. That doesn't validate what I do. It's a bonus.
You make so many important points in talking about what the value of writing is to you. Whether it's writing or music or art or some other creative expression. How important do you think it is for, especially people living with MS? How important do you think finding that creative outlet is for each of us?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think it's incredibly powerful once they find it, and even more so, I think it's incredibly important that they try to find it, that they explore it, and not get discouraged if they try. Let's pretend that they try writing, and then they feel like they're not good enough, and that's why I always preface by saying, I'm not trained in this. Sometimes I'm not a good writer. Sometimes I'm not a great writer. I'm just a writer. And I write. Even with my music, I sit down and I'm fortunate enough to still have my hands. And that's another thing. It's good it's good hand-eye brain exercise to teach yourself a musical instrument, and it's really important. And if music doesn't if someone says no, I'm not even going to try that, some sort of hobby, this gets into the topic, and we can talk about this. This might be worthy of another discussion sometime, as far as the study of neuroplasticity, to where when you've got some lesions in your brain, or if you've got even a traumatic brain injury or other issues that affect your brain, if you can retrain it. I'm not saying to where you're going to be perfect and being, all healthy once again, the way your brain used to be at some point in your life. But if you can retrain it to take different pathways, and that means learning a foreign language. Okay, there's all sorts of apps and things that can help you do that. Learning a musical instrument, you can get an acoustic guitar at a pawn shop for $25 to $50. Okay, or somebody maybe in your family or neighborhood has one that they would give you, or just a notebook and a pencil to write down, your thoughts of the day and see where that leads you. And if you can't write, if your MS has affected your hands, there are several apps that turn your voice to text. There are more options out there these days. So if you can't do any of the above or don't have an interest, just start someplace. Find something that you're passionate about. They've studied people with Alzheimer's and dementia. When they bring music into their mind, it's almost magical what happens. So therefore, you can tell by the change in my voice, it's quite a passion of mine. If you can explore anything of creative expression, and even if that means just listening to music and creating a more appreciative notion of what you're listening to become a student again, read, or if your eyesight is in trouble, audiobooks, find a way to study things that you haven't studied before. Okay.
Well, Mary, if people want to explore your creative efforts, where can they find your blog? www.musettemary, and that's M as in Mary, MUSETTE Mary.com. We will include a link to that in the show notes as well.
Thank you.
Well, Mary, I want to thank you for your tireless efforts aimed at bringing the MS community a little closer together. I think that good things happen when we connect, and it's because of your efforts that thousands of people affected by MS are connecting today and every day. So thanks again, and thanks for making the time to talk with me.
Well, John, it's because of your efforts, too. You bring these stories into everybody's life day to day and week to week, and so thank you for you. We are so appreciative of everything that you do. So I'm so thrilled that I was able to be a part of this. Thank you, John.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. If you haven't yet, don't forget to visit the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free RealTalk MS app for your iOS or Android smartphone or device. You'll never miss a podcast episode, and the app allows me to share all sorts of bonus content with you. And I'm planning some great bonus content this year. So I hope you'll take a moment and download the app today. My name is John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.